Ready. Here we go again. What everybody wants. Wouldn't you like to? Wouldn't you like to have a magic phrase that will stop arguments, eliminate ill feeling, create goodwill, and make the other person listen attentively? Yes, alright, here it is. I don't blame you on uh, one iota for a feeling as you do. If I were you, I would undoubtedly feel just as you do. An answer that will soften the most cantankerous old cause arrive, and you can say that and be 100% sincere, because if you were the other person, you of course will feel just as he does. Take El Capone for example. Suppose you had inherited the same body and temperature and mind that El Capone had. Suppose you had his environmental experience, you would then precisely what he was and where he was. For it is those things, only those things, that made him what he was. The only reason, for example, that you are not a rattlesnake is that your mother and father weren't rattlesnakes. You deserve very little credit for being what you are, and remember, the people who come to you irritated, bigoted, unreasoning, deserve very little discredit for being what they are. Feel sorry for the poor devils, pity them, sympathize with them, say to yourself, there, but for the grace of God, go yell. Three-fourths of people you will ever meet are hungering and thirsting for sympathy. Give it to them, and they will love you. Sympathize with every single person, ideas and desire. I once gave a broadcast about the author little woman Louise May Alcott. Naturally, I knew she had lived and written her immortal books in Concord, Massachusetts. But without thinking that I was saying, I spoke of visiting her old home in Concord, New Hampshire. If I had said New Hampshire only once, it might have been forgotten. But like I said it twice, I was dealers with letters and telegrams, stinging messages that swirled around my defenseless head like a swarm of hornets. Many were indignant, a few insulting. One colonial dame who had been reared in Concord, Massachusetts, and who was then living in Philadelphia vented for scorching wrath upon me. She could not have been much more bitter if I had accused Miss Alcott of being a cannibal from New Guinea. As I read the letter, I said to myself, thank God I am not married to that woman. I felt like writing and telling her that although I had made a mistake in geography, she had made a far greater mistake in common courtesy. That was to be just my opening sentence. Then I was going to roll up my sleeves and tell her that what I really thought, but I didn't. I controlled myself. I realized that any thought fool could do that, and that most fools will do just that. I wanted to be a fool, so I resolved to try to turn her hostility into friendliness. It will be a challenge, a sort of game I could play. I said to myself. After all, if I wait, see, I would probably feel just as she does. So I determined to sympathize with her viewpoint. The next time I was in Philadelphia, I called her on the telephone. The conversation went something like this. Mrs. So and so, you wrote me a letter a few weeks ago and I want to thank you for it. In incisive calls the well-bred to whom have I the honor of speaking. I am a stranger to you. My name is Dale Carnegie. You listen to a broadcast I gave out Louisa May Alcott a few Sundays ago, and I made the unforgivable blunder of saying that she had lived in Concord, New Hampshire. It was a stupid blunder, and I want to apologize for it. It was so nice for you to take the time to write me. I'm sorry, Mr. Carnage, that I wrote as I did. I lost my temper. I must apologize. No, you are not the one to apologize. I am. Any school child would have known better than to have said what I said. I apologize for the air the following Sunday. I want to apologize to you personally now. I was born in Concord, Massachusetts. My family has been prominent in Massachusetts affairs for 2 centuries, and I am very proud of my native state. I was really quite distressed to hear you say that Miss Alcott had lived in a New Hampshire, but I am really awesome of that later. I assure you that you would not one-tenth as distressed as I am. My ear did not hurt Massachusetts, but it did hurt me. It is so seldom that people of your standing and culture take the time to write people who speak on the radio, and I so do hope you will write me again if you did it and you read my talks. You know I really like very much the way you have accepted my criticism. You must be a very nice person. I should like to know you better. So because I had apologized and sympathized with her point of view, she began apologizing and sympathizing with my point of view. I had the satisfaction of controlling my temper, the satisfaction of returning kindness for an insult. I got infinitely more real fun out of making her like me than I could ever have gotten out of taking her to go and take a jump in the Wisconsin River. Thank you. Every man who occupies the White House is faced almost daily with thorny problems in human relations. President Taft was no exception, and he learned from experience the enormous chemical value of sympathy in neutralizing the acid of hard feeling. In his book Ethics in Service, Taft gives rather an amusing illustration of how he sought from the ire of a disappointed and ambitious mother. A leading Washington wrote Taft, whose husband had some political influence, came and labored with me for 6 weeks or more to appoint her son to a position. She secured the aid of senators and congressmen in formidable numbers and came with them to see what they spoke with emphasis. The place was one requiring technical qualification, and following the recommendation of the head of the bureau, I appointed somebody. I then received a letter from the mother saying that I was most ungrateful since I declined to make her a happy woman as I could have done by a turn of my hand. She complained further that she had labored with her state delegation and got all the votes for an administration bill in which I was especially interested, and this was the way I had rewarded her. When you get a letter like that, the first thing you do is to think how you can be severe with a person who has committed an impropriety or even been a little impertinent. Then you may compose an answer. Then, if you are wise, you will put the letter in a drawer and lock the drawer. Take it out in the course of 2 days. Such a communication will always be a 2 days delay in answering, and when you take it out after the interval, you will not send it. That is just the course I took. After that, I sat down and wrote her just as polite a letter as I could, telling her I realized some other disappointments under such circumstances, but that really the appointment was not left to my mere personal preference, that I had to select a man with technical qualification and had therefore to follow the recommendation of the head of the bureau. I expressed the hope that her son would go on to accomplish what she had hoped for him in the position which she then had. The mollified her mollified her, and she wrote me a note saying she was sorry she had written as she had. But the appointment I sent in was not confirmed at once, and after an interval I received a letter which purported to come from her husband, although it was in the same handwriting as all the others. I was daring advice that due to the nervous prostration that had followed disappointment in this case, she had to take to her bed and had developed a most serious case of cancer of the stomach. Would I not to restore to her to health by withdrawing the first name and replacing it by her son's? I had to write another letter, this one to the husband, to say that I hope the diagnosis will prove to be inaccurate, that I sympathize with him in the sorrow he must have in the serious illness of wife, but that it was impossible to withdraw the name sent it. The man whom I appointed was confirmed, and within 2 days, days after I received the letter, we gave a music at the White House. The first two people to greet Mrs. Taft and me were this husband and wife, though the wife had so recently been in articular notice. J. Magnum represented an elevator accelerator maintenance company in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which had the maintenance contract for accelerators in one of Tulsa's leading hotels. The hotel manager did not want to shut down accelerator for more than 2 hours at a time because he did not want to inconvenience the hotel's guests. The repair that had to be made would take at least 8 hours, and his company did not always have a specially qualified mechanic available at the convenience of the hotel. When Mr. Magnum was able to schedule a top flight mechanic for this job, he telephoned the hotel manager, and instead of arguing with him to give him the necessary time, he said, Rick, I know your hotel is quite busy and you would like to keep the escalator shutdown time to a minimum. I understand your concern about this and we want to do everything possible to accommodate you. However, our diagnosis of this situation shows that if we do not do a complete job now, your escalator may suffer more serious damage, and that will cause a much longer shutdown. I know you would not want to inconvenience your guest for several days. The manager had to agree that an 8-hour shutdown was more desirable than several days. By sympathizing with the manager's desire to keep his patron happy, Mr. Magnum was able to win the hotel manager to his way of thinking easily and without rancor. Joy Norris, a piano teacher in St. Louis, Missouri, told of how she had handled a problem piano teachers often have with teenage girls. Babbitt had exceptionally long fingernails. This is a serious handicap to anyone who wants to develop proper piano playing habits. Mrs. Norris reported, I knew her long fingernail would be a barrier for her in her desire to play well. During our discussion prior to starting a lesson with me, I did not mention anything to her about her nails. I didn't want to discourage her from taking lessons, and I also knew she would not want to lose that which she took so much pride in and such great care to make attractive. After our first lesson, when I felt that the time was right, I said, Babbitt, you have attractive hands and beautiful fingernails. You want to play the piano as well as you are capable of and as well as you would like to. You will be surprised how much quicker and easier it will be for you if you will trim your nails shorter. Just think about it, okay? She made a face which was definitely native. I also talked to her mother about this situation. Augie mentioned how lovely her nails well. And the native reaction, it was obvious that Babbitt's of beautifully manicured nails were important to her. The following week, Babbitt returned for a second lesson. Much to my surprise, the fingernails had been trimmed. I complimented her and praised her for making such a sacrifice. I also thanked her mother for influencing Babbitt to cut her nails. Her reply was, oh, I had nothing to do with it. Babbitt decided to do it on her own, and this was the first time she had ever trimmed her nails for anyone. Did Mrs. Norris threaten Babbitt? Did she say she will refuse to teach a student with long fingernails? No, she did not. She let Babbitt know that her fingernails were a thing of beauty and it will be sacrificed to cut them. She implied, I sympathize with you. I know it won't be easy, but it will pay off in your better musical development. Saul Horrocks was probably American #1 impresario. For almost half a century, he handled artists such world-famous artists as Sally Pin, Isadora Duncan, and Pavlova. Mr. Horrocks told me that one of the first lessons he had learned in dealing with these temperamental stars was that necessity for sympathy, and more sympathy with their idiosyncrasies. For 3 years, he was impresario for Federer Chapin, one of the greatest bassists who ever thrilled the wrist box holder at the Metropolitan. Yet Chapin was a constant problem. He carried on like a spoiled child. To put it in Mr. Horrocks' on inimitable phrase, he was a hell of a fellow in every way. For example, Sally Penn would call up Mr. Horrocks about noon of the day he was going to sing and say, Saul, I feel terrible. My throat is like a raw hamburger. It's impossible for me to sing tonight. Did Mr. Horrocks argue with him? Oh no, he knew that an entrepreneur could not handle artists that way. So he would rush over to a Chaplin hotel, dripping with sympathy. What a pity, he would moan. What a pity, my poor fellow. Of course, you cannot sing. I will cancel the engagement at once. It will only cost you a couple of $100,000, but that is nothing in comparison to your reputation. Then Silabin would sigh and said, What else, you had better come over later in the day. Come at 5 and see how I feel then. At 5 o'clock, Mr. Horrocks would again rush to his hotel, dripping with sympathy. Again, he would insist cancelling the engagement, and again, Silapin would sigh and say, Well, maybe you had better come to see me later. I may be better then. At 7:30, the great pastor would consent to sing only with the understanding that Mr. Horrocks would walk out on the stage of Metropolitan and announced that happening had a very bad cold and was not in good voice. Mr. Horrocks would lie and say, We'll do it, for he knew that was the only way to get the pastor out on the stage. Dr. Arthur Aigett said in the splendid book Educational Psychology, sympathy the human species universally craves. The child eagerly displays his injury or even influence a caught or bruised in order to reap abundant sympathy. For the same purpose, adults show their bruises, read their accident, illness, especially details of surgical operation. Self-pity for misfortune really demands that is in some measure practically a universal practice. So if you want to win people to your way of thinking, put in practice. Be sympathetic with the other person's ideas and desire. I was created on the edge of J.C. James country out in Missouri, and I visited the James farm at Kearney, Missouri, where the son of J.C. James was then living. His wife told me stories of how J.C. robbed trains and held up banks and then gave money to the neighboring farmers to pay off their mortgage. J.C. James probably regarded himself as an idealist at heart, just as Doc Scott took on Crowley, Al Capone, and many other organized crime godfather did generation later. The fact is that all the people you meet have a high regard for themselves and like to be fine and unselfish in their own estimation. J. Pierpont Morgan observed in one of his analytical interludes that a person usually has two reasons for doing a thing, one that sounds good and a real one. The person himself will think of the real reason. You don't need to emphasize that but all of us being idealist at heart. Like to think of motives that sound good, so in order to change people appeal to the nobler motives. Is that too idealistic to work in business? Let's take the case of Hamilton J. Farrell of the Farrell Mitchell Company of Glenorchy, Pennsylvania. Mr. Farrell had a disgruntled tenant who threatened to move. The tenant lease still had 4 months to run. Nevertheless, he saw noticed that he was vacating immediately regardless of lease. These people had lived in my house all winter, the most expensive part of the year, Mr. Farrell said as he told the story to the class, and I knew it would be difficult to rent the apartment again before fall, so I could see all that rent income going over the hill, and believe me, I surveyed. Now, ordinarily, I would have waded into the tenant and advised him to read this again. I would have pointed out that if he moved, the whole balance of his rent would fall due at once, and that I could and would move to collect. However, instead of flying off the handle and making a scene, I decided to try other tactics. So I started like this. Mr. Doe, I said, I have listened to your story and I still don't believe you intend to move. Years in the renting business have taught me something about human nature, and I size you up in the first place as being a man of your word. In fact, I am so sure of it that I am willing to take gamble. Now here's my proposition. Lay up your decision on the table for a few days and think it over. If you come back to me between now and the first of the month when your rent is due and tell me you still intend to move, I give you my word I will accept your decision as final. I will privilege you to move and admit to myself I have been wrong in my judgment. But I still believe you are men of a word and will live up to a contract. For after all, we are other men are monkeys and the choice usually lies with ourselves. Well, when the new month came around, this gentleman came to see me and paid his rent in person. He and his wife had talked it over, he said, and decided to stay. They had concluded that the only honorable thing to do was to live up to their lease. When the late Lord Northcliffe found a newspaper using a picture of him, which he didn't want published, he wrote the letter, but did he say, please do not publish the picture for me anymore, don't like it. No, he appealed to a noble motive. He appealed to the respect and love that all of us have for the motherhood. He wrote, please do not publish the picture of me anymore, my mother doesn't like it. When John D. Rockefeller Jr. wished to stop newspaper photographers for snapping pictures of his children, he too appealed to the nobler motives. He did not say, I don't want their picture published. No, he appealed to the desire deep in all of us to refrain from harming children. He said, you know how it is, boys, you've got children yourself and some of you, and you know it's not good for you to get too much publicity. When Cyrus H.K. Curtis, the poor boy from Maine, was starting on his meteoric career, which was destined to make him millions as owner of the Saturday Evening Post and the Ladies' Home Journal, he couldn't afford to pay his contributors the price that other magazine paid. He could not afford to hire first-class author to write for money alone, so he appealed to the nobler motives. For example, he persuaded even Louisa May Alcott, the immortal author of A Little Woman, to write for him when she was at the flood tide of her fame, and he did it by offering to send a check for $100 not to her but to her favorite charity. Right here, the skeptic may say, oh, that stuff is alright for Northcliffe and Rockefeller or sentimental novels, but I like to see you make it work with the tough babies I have to collect bills from. You may be right, nothing will work in all cases and nothing will work with all people. If you are satisfied with the result, you are now getting wise change. If you are not satisfied, why not experiment? At any rate, I think you will enjoy reading this true story told by James L. Thomas, a former student of mine. 6 customers of certain automobile company refused to pay the bill for servicing. None of the customers protested the entire bill, but each claimed that the sum of one charge was wrong. In each case, the customer had signed for the work done, so the company knew it was right and said so. That was the first mistake. Here are the steps the men in the credit department took to collect this overdue bills. Do you suppose they succeeded? They called on each customer, told him bluntly that they had come to collect a bill that was long past due. They made it very plain that the company was absolutely and unconditionally right, therefore he, the customers, were absolutely and unconditionally wrong. They intimated that the company knew more about automobiles than he could ever hope to know. So, as the argument about result, they argued. They and F. Smith could reconcile the customer and settle the account. You can answer that one yourself. At this stage of affair, the credit manager was about to open fire with a battery of legal talent when fortunately the matter came to the attention of general manager. The manager investigated this defaulting client and discovered that they all had very reputation of paying the bill promptly. Something was wrong here. Something was practically wrong about the method of collection. So he called in James L. Thomas and told him to collect his own collectible account. Herein are the steps of Mr. Thomas took. My visit to each customer was like place to collect a bill long past due, a bill that we knew was absolutely, but I didn't say a word about that. I explained I had to call to find out what his company had done or failed to do. I made it clear that until I had heard the customer story, I had no opinion to offer. I told him the company made no claims to being infallible. I told him I was interested in his car and I knew more about his car than anyone in the world, what that he was authority on the subject. I let him talk and listen to him with all the interest and sympathy that he wanted and he had accepted. Finally, when the customer was in his general mood, I put the whole thing up to his sense of his fair play. I appealed to the noble motives. First, I said, I want to know that I also feel this matter has been badly mishandled. You've been inconvenienced and annoyed by one of our representatives. That should never have happened. I am sorry, and as a representative of the company, I apologize. As I sat here and listened to your side of story, I could not help being impressed by your fairness and patience. And now, because you are fair-minded and patient, I am going to ask you to do something for you. For me, it is something that you can do better than anyone else, something you know more about than anyone else. Here is your bill. I know it is safe for me to ask you to accept what as you will do if you are the president of my company. I am going to leave it all up to you. Whatever you say goes. It is just as the bill is certainly and not quite a kick out of it. The bill ranges from $150 to $400, but did the customer give himself the best of it? Yes, one of them did. One of them refused to pay a penny of the dispute charge, but the other five all gave the company the best of it. And as the cream of the whole thing, we deliver new cash to all 6 of this customer within the next 2 years. Experience has taught me, says Mr. Thomas, that when no information can be secured about the customer, the only sound basis on which to proceed is to assume that he or she is sincere, honest, truthful, and unwilling to and anxious to pay the charge one begins they are correct. To put it differently and perhaps more clearly, people are honest enough to discharge their obligation. The expression to that rule are comparatively few, and I am convinced that individuals who are inclined to chisel will in much react favorably if you make them feel that you consider them honest, upright, and fair. Fucking hell, appeal to number motives. Many years ago, the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin. Many years ago, the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin was being mailing by a dangerous whispering campaign. A malicious image was being circulated. Advertisers were being told that the newspaper was no longer attractive to readers because it carried too much advertising, and too little news. Immediate action was necessary. The gossip had to be squelched. But how? This is the way it was done. The bulletin clip from its regular edition already matters of all kinds. On average, they classified it and published it as a book. The book was called One Day. It contained 307 pages, as many as hardcover book. Yet the bulletin had printed all its news and feature material on one day and sold it not for several dollars but a few cents. The printing of the book dramatized the fact that the bulletin carried an enormous amount of interesting reading matter. It conveyed the fact more vividly, more interestingly, more impressively, and that then pages of figures and mere talk about what could have gone. This is the depth dramatization. Merely stating the truth is not enough. The truth has to be made vivid, interesting, dramatic. You have to use so many if the movies do it, television does it, and you will have to do it if you want attention. Expert in Windows display know the power of dramatization. For example, the manufacturers of a new rat poison gave dealers a Windows display that included two live rats. That in the week the rats were shown sales zoomed to 5 times their normal rate. Television commercial one example of the use of dramatic technique in selling products. Sit down one evening in front of a television set and analyze what the advertiser do in each of the presentation. You will note how an antacid medicine changes the color of the acid in a test tube while its competitor doesn't. How one brand of soap or detergent get a greasy short clean on the other brand leaves grey. You will see a car maneuver around a series of turns and curves far better than just being told about it. Having faces will show contentment with a variety of products. All of this dramatized for the viewer the advantage offered by whatever is being sold, and they do get people to buy them. You can dramatize your ideas in business or in any other aspect of your life. It's easy. GM who sells for the NCR company in Richmond, Virginia, told how he made a sale by dramatic demonstration. Last week I called a neighborhood grocer. I saw that the cash register he was using at his checkout counter were very old fashioned. I approached the owner and told him, "You are literally throwing away pennies every time a customer goes through your line." With that, I threw a handful of pennies on the floor. He quickly became more attentive. The mere words would have been more interest to him. For the sound of pennies hitting the floor really struck me. It was able to get an order from him to replace all of his old machine. It works in home life as well. When the old-time lover proposed to his sweetheart, did he just use words of love? No, he went down on his knee that really showed he meant what he said. Wouldn't propose on our knees anymore, but many suitors will set up a romantic atmosphere before they pop the question. Dramatizing what you want work with children as well. Joe B. Fenter Jr. of Birmingham, Alabama was having difficulty getting his 5-year-old boy and 3-year-old daughter to pick up the toys, so he invented a train. Joey was the engineer. On his tricycle, Janet was attached, and in the evening she loaded all the coal on the cargoes and then jumping while her brother drove around the room. In this way, the room was cleaned up with her lecture argument threads. Mary Catherine Wolf of Mishawaka, Indiana was having some problems at work and decided that she had to discuss them with the boss. On Monday morning, she questioned an appointment with him, but he was told he was very busy and she should arrange with his secretary for an appointment later in the week. The secretary indicated that his schedule was very tight, but she would try to fit her in. Mrs. would describe what happened. I did not get a reply from her all week long. Whenever I questioned her, she would give me a reason why the boss could not see me. Friday morning came and I had heard nothing definite. I really wanted to see him and discuss my problem before the weekend, so I asked myself how I could get him to see me. What I finally did was this: I wrote him a formal letter. I indicated in the letter that I fully understood how extremely busy he was all week, but it was important that I speak with him. I included the form letter and safe address in Google and asked him to please fill it out or ask his secretary to do it and return it to me. The form letter read as follows: I will be able to see you on. I will give you minutes of a time. Put this letter in his basket at 8 a.m. At 2 p.m. I checked my mailbox. There was my self address in look. He had addressed my form letter himself and indicated he will see that afternoon and he could give me 10 minutes of his time. I met with him and we talked for over an hour and solved my problem. If I had not met a stranger, if I thought I would want to see him, I would probably be still waiting for an appointment. James P. White had to present a lengthy market report. His firm had just finished an exhaustive study for a leading brand of cold drink. Data were needed immediately over the competition in his market. The prospective customers were one of the biggest and most formidable men in the advertising business, and his first approach failed almost before he began. The first time I went in Mr. Boyte's I found myself sidetracked into a futile discussion of the method used in investigation. He argued and I argued. He told me as wrong and I tried to prove that I was right. I finally won my point to my own satisfaction, but my time was up. The interview was over. I still hadn't produced result. The second time I didn't bother with tabulation of figures and that I went to see this man advertisement fashion. As I entered the office, we were busy on the phone. While he finished his conversation, I opened a suitcase and dumped 32 jars of cold cream on top of his desk. All products he knew, all the competitors of his cream. On each jar, I had a tag itemizing the result of trade investigation and each child who told his story briefly, dramatically what happened. There was no longer an argument. Here was something new, something different. He picked up first one and then another of the jars of cold cream and read the information on the tag. A friendly conversation developed. He asked additional questions. He was intensely interested here. Originally, given me only 10 minutes to present my facts, but 10 minutes passed, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, and at the end of an hour, we were still talking. I presented the same fact this time, but I have presented previously, but I was now accessing advertising so many and what a difference it made.